LCS promotion tournament. It's Apex versus Impulse, and as always, we'll start off talking about team comps a little bit. So, on the blue side, we've got Jhin Karma bot lane versus a Lucian Brown bot lane. So this is the kind of big factor, and I'll just pause there. We'll talk about team comps. In terms of determining this lane swap, because Maokai into Echo is pretty chill, like it's a farm matchup. Graves into Lulu, also a farm matchup. We've got two teleports on both sides, really important to note. Kindred, much better scaling into the late game. Elise, much better ganking in the early game. Tower diving, which is really useful for lane swaps. But Kindred, you don't want to let farm up. So that's something which will play a big factor. But more crucially is Jhin. Jhin is a pretty polarizing factor for lane swaps because he sucks at them. He's really bad at pushing towers because he has to reload all the time. And he's also in a double range matchup with Xpecial, who's one of the better supports around in NA. He was like king of NA for a while. He's in a challenger team at the moment, unfortunately for him. Maybe he'll get back into the LCS. I actually still don't know if Apex got into the LCS, but they probably did because they're against TDK to qualify, and I would have favoured them in that matchup, but I might be wrong. So, you've got Karma and Jhin into Lucian Braum. Double range matchup with a Karma. Karma's a super strong lane bully, so you probably want to dodge that matchup. So that's what we're going to see. Looking at the level 1 start, which is always important, this is your standard defensive start. And these are the positions that you stand in so that no one can cross into your side of the river and you just sit there. And that's what we're going to see. In this scenario, you don't have the invade lane swap wards that we've talked about before, so you don't know where they're starting. It's pretty much a 50-50 unless they happen to cross over into cross over one of the river wards, which are just being placed down now, and you see them. But pretty much it's a 50-50 at this stage. You just have to blind guess, and that's where the mind games come in. If you expect a team to lane swap on you, then you go there. And this is what I imagine Apex is doing here. I'm pretty sure they don't want the lane swap, and I'm pretty sure they know that Tip wants a lane swap because Lucian's much better in a lane swap scenario. Echo is much better in a lane swap scenario. He's really good at pushing lanes with his Q. So this is probably what they're going to do. So this, in my eyes, is Apex calling and going, okay, Tip's probably going to lane swap, let's go match them. And the reason they're invading here is to find out. This is also a key part of jungle starts. So in this game, we're going to see a fair few kind of lower level things, I would say. So normally, when you're going to invade like this, if you're going to start a greedy start, which this is, right? So your top lane and jungle duo are starting on the opposite side from your bot lane duo. A lot of people have been starting recently, either starting a buff camp, so you can't get forced off it, and then just running the hell away, just get the buff and get out, or starting a raptor camp, because then this can't happen. You can't get harassed and have to run all the way the long way around, which gives you a big tempo loss here. So they're doing, a lot of people do what Apex are doing there. The odd part here with Tip is that they actually invade with 2 people, so that's a nice little adaptation because it really forces both flashes, so it really chunks them out. And you see the disadvantage of starting on the Krugs if you're going to get invaded on here because you have to run all the way around and you lose your red buff. So they've got 3 buffed, right? Because Eve and Chris got to take the red buff on the bottom side. They're then going to rotate, send Chris to the top side after 2 camps so that he can ding level 3 off like 2 minions. They're going to push the wave into the tower, and Eve is going to carry on farming, and he's going to get 3 buffs because this whole side, the top side of the map, belongs to them right now. So already Proxion's at a disadvantage, so the lane swap is going pretty well for Apex, but they're going to screw it up. And there's going to be a couple of screw ups and a couple of minor things to improve on, which end up costing them a fair bit. So, as you can see, both junglers are just going to be farming. And the question for Proxion now is, where the hell do I go? He's going to go into the bot side to carry on farming. But obviously he doesn't have another buff camp, so it's a big advantage for Eve. As you can see, Eve has chosen to go all the way into the red side jungle, and then he's going to double back and get his blue buff later. So first tower goes down. They get a pretty good bounce. All the minions die. And then we see, let me minimize that, sorry. So the lane swap wards have gone down to see the other bot lane coming in, and Apex is going to try for standard lanes. So their bot lane recalls, and then they just run straight back up to the top side because they want the standard lanes, right? So this is why it's important to have those lane swap wards down so that you can see whether or not you're going to push the waves as a top laner, because there's a turret disparity on either side. There's a really long lane in favor of one team on one side of the map, and you don't want to be stuck there with the other guy freezing and you having to overextend, which is a theme that we're going to see later, and it's how Tip really gets into this game. So you don't want to push that wave until you see the AD carry and support if you're a top laner. The next wave after the initial tower bounce. So Apex has gone for the 2-on-2 lane, which is a fairly safe thing, but look at the bottom wave. So Feng is going to push this wave all the way in, and Chris has to be there, right? He has to respond. A, Feng is level 3 because he's got a bigger push, and B, Chris is level 2 and he has to stay at that tower or he loses all the experience. And so Chris can't respond. Bam, double B TP. You can't be in this lane this far pushed up if you're Apex. You can't be making plays onto this lane because your TP user is essentially a non-factor. He is not there. If you're going to make aggressive plays, you have to have the backup of your TP user, and this is why it's so important to have lane pressure. Now, Police gets cut off. Proxin and Feng make the right move. They double back around him and try to seal him off. They get a bunch of damage onto this tower and they chunk him down. And this is where it gets even weirder. So Chris has just about managed to push this wave off. Pyrion has just about got down to the mid lane. So this frees Keen up to roam because he's pushed the wave all the way into the tower. So Keen has wave pressure. And Expression and Leave are going to be in here trying to defend this tower. Normally, you'd kind of leave this tower. Normally, this would just be, okay, we're screwed. But I see why they made it. They don't want to give up the... They don't want to take a 1-for-0 tower trade, right? So they would be a tower down in theory. They use a bunch of summoner spells. They use Chris's TP because obviously Feng doesn't have his. He's out of mana. They're all low. And Keen has roam priority in the bottom lane, and the wave is pushing out for Chris. So fine, they make a decent call there to try and salvage a bad situation. Unfortunately, they end up burning Keen's flash. Maybe they could have just done with pushing them off the tower, but as it is, they don't get anything. The bottom wave is pushing out. They get a push in the top lane, and Pyrion manages to push in the wave to the tower and get a good recall off. So not too much of a big advantage right now, but Tip has managed to get a decent amount of gold. And now we're going to start seeing the problem with what's happened here. And that's that if you look at both waves, there are freezes. And normally we see freezes get punished really hard. Because if there are two freezes, if there's a freeze on either side, then you have no lanes that can move, right? Maybe your support can move from lane to lane, but that's it. We're supporting your jungler. But your AD carry and your top lane are essentially stuck there. And that's the case right now for Tip. But if you have a freeze, and there are long lanes, like there are right now, then, like, look at the bottom lane. Apex has to extend really, really far into this lane, and this is not safe for them, and you can just sit and freeze this at this tower, and in the top lane as well. Chris has to extend really, really far to get any farm to try and push this into the tower, and Feng can just sit there and freeze this. So he can kill his own minions using the Apex minions, the blue minions, and that will starve CS. And you've already got a pretty big CS differential on MASH over Police. Sorry, I don't really know the players' names very well, so I'm a bit slow on the uptake on this, and I'm kind of tired. But so you're going to get a really big CS disparity. So this is the time when both those waves got pushed into the towers. The Apex bottom lane pretty much just ran back into their jungle and were like, what do? That's the time right there when you go for the dragon. You've got two waves pushed in. Their TP user doesn't have TP. The Lulu doesn't have TP. Keen has a push priority because Graves just perma pushes super easily without burning any mana. You rotate for the dragon there 100%. So that's Apex messing up a little bit. They're not necessarily understanding how much pressure they have, and they're not playing properly around the pressure. We already saw that in the bot lane. They commit to a play where you don't have the pressure to make this work, right? Tip has a big pressure advantage, and they read the situation well and get the play off. So fine. Now, the bigger a freeze you have, the bigger a slow push is going to start. So you're going to see top wave start to slow push, and you're going to see bottom wave start to slow push. And you're going to get a huge CS disparity on MASH until that wave reaches the tower. And the wave's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because it went all the way into the tower and because it's a really long lane, right? And this wave will just auto push in the bottom lane because they have a tower advantage, right? And it will auto push in the top lane into Tip. So Feng's just going to be able to freeze there happily forever. Again, top lane's frozen, so Apex has, and mid lane has push priority or rotate priority because Graves auto pushes. So that's a nice adaptation from them. They roll up and get the Rift Herald. Good, okay. So this big old bottom wave is reaching the tower, and there are a lot of CS there for Police to pick up. There's what, 3 waves there plus a cannon-ish? And this is where Tip makes a bit of a mistake. The bot lane starts running back here, right? Look at the TPs. Chris doesn't have TP, Feng does. Feng's just about to push out one more wave, so he could push that one wave, and then they could make a P-play onto these minions. Also, look at the level disparity. Because this wave has been building for so long, Police and X Special have just had to sit in their tower, as you saw, and like sit in their jungle, just kind of twiddling their thumbs, not doing anything while they wait for this wave to get pushed into them. This is absolutely the time when you make a dive. At the very worst, it's a 4v3 because you have 2 TPs, and or at the very worst, it's a 4v4. But even if you commit everything and then they come in, you walk away, and they lose all the CS at the tower because they have to respond to this play. But your bottom lane is 2 levels up, right? So you just flash straight onto them with your Braum, hit ulti, and blow them up before they can even respond. That's my opinion. I think if you're watching the Rocks Tigers, if you're watching G2, these super aggressive, fast-paced teams, they absolutely pull the trigger and make that play there. I'm pretty sure on that one. But as it is, bottom wave gets pushed in, everyone has their TPs up, and Tip doesn't get punished for it. Tip has not been punished for having 2 freezes in their lanes, and they get to push these big waves in, and then they have their own priority. This is how it works. We talked about this before. You will have priority for a short while until the waves get back to you. So the waves are pushing back to them at the moment, and they have all this time because they're really long lanes to be able to make a play, and they get a free dragon for it. Yippee. Another interesting point that we want to talk about quickly is itemization. Casters touched on it in this, and it's that both of the AD carries built Swifties, and that's because we're in long lanes and because they're in situations where they're expecting to potentially be swapping around a lot. So they're expecting to not actually, they've also got culls, which is a big telling factor. If you're expecting to not actually be playing against players, you get Swifties and culls just so you can make rotations, you can avoid TP ganks that way, and all of that good stuff. So again, if you push a big wave into the tower, it's going to bounce and you're going to get a nice freeze on your side, and you can carry on doing this. Jhin is really sucky when he builds swiftness boots. This is an interesting play here, Pyrian face checking. Jhin is really sucky at last hitting under towers when all he has is Doran's Blade, a Cull, and Swifty boots. So you can carry on pushing that wave in and then freezing the bottom wave. This team fight is pretty interesting in that Tip managed to win it because even though they lost their mid laner first, but the Lamb's Respite does so much work. Police has absolutely no items at this point, and Eve is pushed out really, really early, and the fight reset on Feng's ulti just does a lot of work. Looking at this team, the fight reset from Echo, the ulti from both Lulu and Kindred, and the Braum shield just make for such a hard combo to kill. It makes a really, really annoying protect the Lucian or protect the Kindred for that matter comp, and Kindred's getting big. So it's pretty bad. It's looking pretty dicey for Apex at this point. They just lost a 4v5 team fight. And this strategy of starving out Jhin is actually a really nice strategy for this meta. The meta's probably about to change because of the mid-season changes. Sorry, but in a meta where you've got lots of tanks and lots of big beefy frontliners, a Jhin with no items is just going to sit there and throw pebbles at you for ages. He's not going to break through your front line, and that's who you're relying on to break through front lines. AD carries are your source of consistent teamfight DPS that can shred tanks. Mages can't do it as well because they don't have the same consistent DPS. They're built around bursting, generally speaking, unless you're talking about like Cassiopeia or, I don't know, Malzahar or Zyra or something, the ones that are getting reworked, interestingly enough. So, the lanes have swapped around. Again, this is why we see that they're getting Swifty boots, and you've got a huge CS differential on the Tip bot lane. And at this stage, Tip knows that they can pretty much do whatever they want. They see Jhin top, and it doesn't even matter. They can force this lane. They can force this lane as hard as they like. TPs are down on the bottom lane, so that's an island. And And so you send your bottom lane, you send your jungler up to where the bottom lane is, and you just go, we're taking this tower. We have a 3-0 Kindred and a 40 CS differential. You're not staying here. And, you know, Xpecialist is still level 5. He's 2 levels down on gate. Apex tries to push the mid lane for this, which is a fair enough counter rotation to make. The tower was already low from earlier when they stuck around to try and defend the tower. So, yeah, that goes down super quickly. And then look at this. You push the wave in, and someone has to be there to catch the waves coming in. There's 2 waves coming in the top lane, so you have free time to do the Rift Herald. So Tip is playing quite nicely around the waves. They're not necessarily abusing the pressure they have, but they're starving Apex out pretty handily. You're coming into the mid game with a Jhin that is just massively behind in his power trough, and that's not going to go well. And Apex group up to potentially take this fight, but A, they're too slow because Keen had to be in the top lane to push those waves out, and B, they just can't take this fight. You still have a 1-level advantage on the AD carry, a 2-level advantage on the support. The top laners aren't there to help, and Feng's getting a pretty big level advantage as well. Everyone just got way more gold. They're 3k gold up at 14 minutes, 3.6k. So it's not looking great for Apex. When you have a Jhin that falls behind, stuff gets really rough. They do have a Graves to balance it out, but then you have pretty much just pure physical damage in your comp. And Elise doesn't really scale that well. She's going to get outscaled really hard by Kindred. So Tip have played this lane swap pretty nicely, I would say. They could have been more aggressive, but I can understand why they wouldn't be. But there were certain timing windows where if you're really looking at where the waves are and where the teleports are, you should be able to make those plays at a high level. And potentially this is why Tip hasn't been doing so well. Although they put up a pretty strong performance in the promotion tournament as a whole. So cutting the video forward just a little bit because there's not that much to talk about. The lane phase is pretty much done and Tip have done the deed, got their advantage, but they're going to be able to pretty much do what they want with the map now. They're going to have auto-pushing lanes because they have tower advantages. Well, they have 1 tower advantage. They're going to have 1 auto-pushing lane, but that will change fairly soon. They are going to be able to snowball the early dragons, which they took. They're going to be able to move around the map, and their team fight is just going to win in the late game. Proxen ends up getting sated at like 17 minutes, and there's really not much that Apex can do at this point, partly because of the team comp and partly because of the way they handle the lane swap. Look for standard lanes with Jhin. That's the best advice I can give for Jhin comps because he, generally speaking, suffers. So we saw, and this is just Keen getting caught out, Chris losing teleport and a free dragon to Tip. So we saw the kind of blind 50-50 start. We saw the late invades and the advantage of starting at a buff camp or at a raptor camp. We saw the nice little adaptation from the 2-man invade from Tip rather than the 1-man invade with the support burning 2 flashes. We saw Apex commit to a play that they couldn't because they had a level disparity and because they had no rotation priority, and we saw them try to take that back using the rotation priority from Keen but failing and committing more and more resources and then getting frozen on those CS disparities, just getting bigger and bigger and bigger because they weren't punishing Tip's freezes. Tip could have done a better job of punishing when they pushed all those lanes in, but in this scenario, do you need to be super aggressive in the early game? You're running a really nice scaling comp, you're going to outscale them anyway. So even if you just come marginally ahead in the lane swap, you're going to win. But right now it's 17 minutes and they're 5k ahead and Kindred is sated. So on that note, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something and maybe you can put this into use. I hope you can. If you did enjoy it, please do like and subscribe, and I would love to hear some feedback